Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show. On today's Ask Me Anything show, I am once again going to address a listener question. If you have a question, please send it to ken@clarityadvisors.io, and we'll try to get to it in a future episode. Okay, today's question. My team is way behind and keeps missing deadlines. We use a project management tool, but it seems like we spend all our time updating status rather than doing the work. We meet weekly to discuss progress, but when I asked what happened or how can we catch up, the team just kept telling me that they're doing their best and getting things done as soon as possible. And so now I don't even have them put due dates on most tasks. I thought Trello was supposed to manage the project and keep people on track. Help. All right. As always, great question and a very common scenario. There is definitely a belief among leaders that assigning tasks to people and having them kept in Trello or Jira or Monday or Asana or whatever project management tool you use, that putting them into those tools and keeping those tools updated will get things accomplished. So the first thing here is we need to not confuse the tool with the work. The project management tool doesn't actually create progress. You have to do the work to get the work done. The tool just documents the activity. It isn't the activity itself. And yes, it's often the case that the team starts to spend way too much time updating the tool rather than actually working on the projects. And they're updating things not with what got accomplished, but moving due dates and reassigning contingencies because things are stacking up and figuring out just how far behind we are rather than doing the work to get back on track. So the tool is not going to solve the problem. Ultimately, we've got an accountability issue here, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to just make sure that we're clear that putting people together, assigning them tasks, no matter how good your team, I've definitely heard, I'm just going to hire great people and give them a tool like Asana or Trello or whatever, and the work will get accomplished. And it's just not true. Nature on its own, and human nature is part of that, doesn't align and produce all by itself. You don't see trees in the forest evenly spaced in straight rows. Only in corn crops and potato crops in fields do you see things organized in neat rows, and that's because there was intention there. We tended those gardens. We planted in an organized way, and we kept the weeds out. Otherwise, if you don't tend things, you just get random. You get a forest with trees kind of wherever, and you get a garden full of weeds and plants and whatever. Things don't just happen. You've got to tend it. And part of the role of a leader is to tend the garden of the team, to prune what needs to be pruned to keep the focus. Darren Hardy talks about the rose bush as a great example. If you don't prune a rose bush, then it diffuses the energy to all the buds instead of just the select few that you don't prune. And so you prune back other buds to allow all the energy and food to go to the few that produce. And so you've got to do that as a leader. You've got to keep your team focused, and you've got to weed. You got to keep the distractions away from them. And you've got to plant things in rows, meaning you've got to be clear about what's expected and have the tasks laid out. And a project management tool can be great for those things, but don't confuse updating the tool and having the tool with how we're going to actually get results. So what's really going on here? Well, ultimately, the question that needs to be asked by this leader is, what if they don't? See, the person writing this question is already telling us that the team isn't getting things done, and the leader is allowing that to happen because they're moving the dates. They're just allowing, when the team comes back and they've missed a date, we just move the date to a new date. And now we don't even put dates on tasks because they're so unreliable. We know we're not going to get it done on time, so why even put a time down? And so ultimately, there's no consequence for failure here. And you're not going to get production when there's no consequence for a lack of production. Again, nature, human nature, when left to its own devices, it does not produce. We produce when there's pressure to produce. And this doesn't have to be an unhealthy pressure, but the trade-off in the workplace is pay, compensation for results. Right? We're paying people to be there, not just to be there, we're paying people to be there to produce, to create results for our customers. And if they're just going to be there and get paid and not have to produce results, well, they're going to do that. People are going to naturally tend toward the easy path. We're like water. We tend to find the path of least resistance. And if there's no consequence, then the path of least resistance is kind of don't do things and just let dates slip and update the project management system with how many things didn't happen and keep updating the dates, or don't even put dates in there. None of that is what we're looking for. So, all right, couple things that the leader is going to need to do here. First, and this is going to be tough. I get it. This is leaning into what is going to be some uncomfortable conversations. But first, we've got to dig in and understand what's happening. Why are the deadlines being missed? And this is not to assign blame. This is 100% to understand what's not working. The system is what's causing this lack of production. We've built a system that allows people to not be held accountable, that allows people to not get things done on time and not be reliable. And so we've got to fix that system. Now, if ultimately it comes down to people not being willing to do work, well, then we've got a people problem. But we're not going to start there. We're going to start assuming that the process and system that we've built to get things done is broken. So we want to understand what's not working and correct it. Maybe these deadlines were unrealistic and people just need more time. That we've given people 1 week when it should be 2 weeks, or 2 days when it should be 3 days. Now, maybe they just need to put in more time. Maybe we gave them 2 days, but they really only worked on it a couple of half days, the equivalent of 1 day instead of a full 2 days. And that's why. Well, sometimes you just need to say, hey, I just need you to put in the hours to get this done. Maybe they need more resources. Maybe we put 2 people on the task, but it's really a 3-person task or a 4-person task. And so let's just understand what isn't working. And that's a system problem, not a people problem. If the deadline was unrealistic or the number of resources wasn't adequate, those are things as the leader we've got to adjust, but those are system things, not people things. Now, if it turns out that people just need to focus and put more time and energy into the task and they're not willing to, okay, now we have a people problem. And now we've got to have a different conversation. So avoiding conflict is a big part of what's happening here. Leaders don't like to, quote, call people out, but that's what needs to happen. We need to say, hey, you committed to getting something done and you didn't, and that's not okay. It needs to not be okay to not get things done. Now, this doesn't have to be public. You can have this kind of conversation one-on-one, and I encourage you to do that. You never want to reprimand in public. Always reprimand to the extent this is a reprimand, but it's a hard conversation that's not positive. It's not going to be fun. And so do that in private. You want to reprimand in private and praise in public. So you want to make sure people get their praise publicly so that everybody knows what a good job they did, because you're going to get more of what you praise. And so when people know what's good and what they're going to get rewarded for and praised for, they're going to do more of it. So you want to make sure that that's really public, so everybody sees all the good things that happen when you do good things. But this is kind of a reprimand. You're kind of bringing somebody into a private conversation, one-on-one. It could be part of your weekly one-on-one, or it could be a separate meeting, but we can't ignore it if we want to get things done. We can't ignore that we're missing deadlines. We can't ignore that work's not getting accomplished. And so we got to sit people down and say, hey, what's happening here? It seems like you're making commitments and aren't fulfilling them. See, because as a leader, you should have 2 expectations, 2 acceptable outcomes of any given task. When you assign a task, when a task is agreed to with a deadline, when somebody's held accountable to that, what that means is that there's only 2 acceptable outcomes. 1, you get the work done on time. And that is clearly the preferred option. When we agree that you're going to have this report written by Friday, that if you get the report written by Friday, that's the win. Now, the second option, though, is that you communicate ahead of time that you're not going to. And that's a less desirable outcome, but it's an equally acceptable outcome. Because what ahead of time allows us to do as leaders is to address the issue and pivot. So if I tell you if we agreed that I'm going to have something to you on, say, Friday, and I figure out like Tuesday, I'm not going to have it done, I can say, hey, listen, I don't feel great about this, but it's clear I'm not going to have the report done on Friday. And so what you can do then as a leader is reassign it to another person that could possibly get it done by Friday, put other resources on it to help me get it done by Friday, see what's on my plate that might be getting in the way and clear those things out of the way so that I can get it done by Friday. Or if none of those things are going to happen and it just isn't going to get done by Friday, well, then we can renegotiate with, if the report wasn't for you, if it was for somebody else outside your department, maybe you can go to that person and say, hey, would it be okay if we get the report to you by Tuesday? We're just not going to have it by Friday. Or if it's a customer, calling the customer and say, hey, we can't do it Friday. Is Monday going to be okay? And possibly it doesn't matter to them. Possibly they're going to be good with renegotiating that due date. But nobody wants to hear about it after the fact. The leader doesn't want to find out on Friday afternoon you aren't going to get the project done because there's no time to do anything with that. And certainly on Monday now it gets really bad when you tell me on Monday, hey, that thing that you did on Friday, that got done, right? And you're like, actually it didn't. That's terrible because what am I going to do now? Now it's already late and I can't adjust. So if you're not going to get it done on time, you've got to give your leader time ahead of time to pivot. Nobody wants to hear their thing didn't happen after the fact because there's just nothing we're going to do about it. It's bad all the way around. So, all right, back to our story here. So the job of the leader here is to lean into what's happening. And that first piece of it is, why are deadlines being missed? And understand that. Then when we figure out that maybe it's the person either not focusing or not working enough, not working enough hours or enough days or whatever it is, and then not raising their hand ahead of time, we've got to get all that on the table and call all that out and make sure that people understand, look, listen, this is what's expected. What's expected is you're going to do what it takes to get things done that you've agreed to do. Now, it goes back to even before that, when you're agreeing to the task. If somebody doesn't think they can get it done, you've got to be able to say, hey, I can't get that done. Friday, there's no way that's going to happen by Friday. And so I'm not even going to sign up for that. Well, and you can start renegotiating that then or figure out if you need more resources or whatever. Well, back on you as a leader, you've got to create an environment. Ask yourself this, is your team comfortable saying no when you're negotiating or when you're assigning tasks? When you say, hey, I'm going to need you next week, I'm going to need this and this done, and I'm going to need this, the first thing done by Wednesday and the second thing done by Friday. Have you created an environment where they're comfortable saying, I don't think that's going to happen. I've got concerns about that. Or is it just one way you're jamming it down their throat going, look, here's what's going to happen or else. And I don't even want to discuss it. This is just what's going to happen. Go do it. You really want to have an environment where people are comfortable saying, hey, can we talk about that? Because that doesn't seem realistic to me. Now, as the leader, you can say, listen, I think if you put in the time and energy, you can get it done. Why don't we do this? Why don't you get started and work hard? And why don't we check in on Tuesday and see how you're doing on Wednesday's project? And let's check in on Wednesday and see how you're doing on Friday's project. And we'll track progress and see if you can't pull this off. And that way you'll know ahead of time if you need to do something different. So kind of a sidetrack there, but make sure that you as a leader are creating an environment where people feel comfortable pushing back against your deadlines. And sometimes that's just the way it is. The deadline's the deadline. The customer needs something. We got to figure out how to get it done. But then once you and your teammate or you and your leader have agreed that this is when it's going to get done, back to the two choices. Either get it done on time or tell people with as much lead time as possible it's not going to happen. Don't wait till the day of or worse, the day after. So, and that's what's got to happen. As a leader, you've got to lean into this stuff. We can't have projects perpetually missing deadlines. And so back to what do you do if they don't? That's ultimately the heart of this. If there's no consequences, then there's no teeth to any of this. If there's no consequence to not getting things done on time, and there's actually a third option here. There's not just get it done on time, tell me about it ahead of time if you can't. There's also option C, which is just don't do it and don't worry about it, and nothing will happen. As a leader, you can't allow that. You've got to set it up that there are consequences, that we're going to have conversation. And if it's a resource issue, you as the leader need to provide those resources or negotiate for those or work on those, whatever. And if it's just a person issue where maybe they're the wrong fit for the role, or they're just not experienced enough yet to do this alone, or they just don't want to work hard enough to do it, whatever, you've got to figure that out and resolve that issue. Because again, these things don't fix themselves. If you don't create an environment where accountability is expected and nothing less is acceptable, and either people are getting things done or communicating early with time to adjust, if that's not your culture, if that's not your environment, then you're going to get what we're getting here. We're going to get deadlines are missed and people are saying they're just doing their best, and we don't even put dates on things anymore because it's all so unreliable, and it's just chaos. So unfortunately, I guess the short answer to all of this is, hey, writer of this question, it's all on you. You're allowing this. You have created an environment where what if they don't? The answer is nothing. There's no consequence for not getting done what needs to get done. And so you've got to go back and make sure you reestablish the expectations and do it in a clear and kind way. You're not mad at people. It's kind of on you for having allowed this. And so you could even apologize to your team. Hey guys, I'm sorry. I realize I've allowed us to get to the place where not accomplishing tasks and not being on time and not being accountable is acceptable. And it's not acceptable. And starting today, we're going to fix it. And it might not be smooth and it might not be easy, but it's what we're going to do. And we're going to recreate this environment to get us to a place where getting things done on time is the expectation. And that's going to be best for all of us so we can rely on each other. And it's ultimately best for our customers and our business to be a team that produces on schedule and as expected. So there you go. Maybe not what you were hoping to hear, but it's definitely not the fault of the tool. The tool only tracks and documents what's happening. It doesn't cause things to happen. And it's not really the fault of the team if there was no consequences for not producing and not being accountable to you, to their customers, and to each other. So there you go. Feel free to email me with your questions. Again, send them to ken@clarityadvisors.io. Also, send me topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes or guests you'd like me to have on the show. And with that, we will see you next time. Thanks for joining me on the Clarity Advisors Show.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors Show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.